When Neil deGrasse Tyson walked into that emergency NASA meeting in August 2006, he knew his decision would either save his career or destroy it completely. The room was filled with the most powerful figures in American astronomy, all staring at him with barely concealed hostility. They had summoned him here for one reason: to force him to reverse the most controversial decision in modern planetary science. But what Tyson did next would shock the scientific community and create one of the most explosive confrontations in the history of space exploration. The controversy had been building for months, but it all started 3 years earlier, when Tyson made a decision that would make him the most hated man in elementary school classrooms across America. As director of the Hayden Planetarium, he had quietly removed Pluto from the solar system display, relegating it to a separate section about Kuiper Belt objects. No announcement, no press conference, just a subtle rearrangement that would change how millions of children understood their cosmic neighborhood. To understand why this decision created such fury, you need to understand what Pluto meant to American culture in 2003. For 73 years, Pluto had been the 9th planet, the scrappy underdog at the edge of our solar system. Children grew up memorizing the 9 planets, teachers built entire curricula around them, and Pluto held a special place in the American imagination as the little planet that could. But Tyson saw something others refused to acknowledge: Pluto was a fraud. The evidence had been accumulating for years. Pluto was smaller than Earth's moon, smaller than 7 moons in our solar system. Its orbit was so eccentric and tilted that for 20 years of its 248-year journey around the Sun, it was actually closer than Neptune. Its composition was more like a comet than a planet. Most damning of all, it resided in the Kuiper Belt, alongside thousands of similar objects that no one was calling planets. The scientific community had been dancing around this reality for decades, too afraid of public backlash to address the obvious truth. Pluto didn't belong with the 8 classical planets. It was fundamentally different in size, composition, and behavior. Keeping it classified as a planet was scientifically dishonest, a case of sentiment overruling evidence. But Tyson's colleagues at other planetariums and museums were furious about his unilateral decision. You can't just decide what is and isn't a planet. Dr. Richard Morrison from the Chicago Museum of Science told him during a heated phone call, "The International Astronomical Union hasn't changed Pluto's status. You're creating chaos." "I'm creating honesty," Tyson replied calmly. "We're supposed to be teaching children about the universe as it actually is, not as we wish it were." The public backlash was immediate and intense. When news of the Hayden Planetarium's Pluto demotion broke in 2001, Tyson's office was flooded with angry letters, most of them from children who felt personally betrayed. "Dear Dr. Tyson," one third grader wrote, "you are mean and wrong. Pluto is too a planet. My teacher says so." The hate mail was relentless. "You have ruined astronomy for my daughter," one parent wrote. "She loved the 9 planets, and now you've destroyed her interest in space. I hope you're proud of yourself." But Tyson refused to back down. During countless interviews and public appearances, he patiently explained the scientific reasoning behind the decision. Pluto was different from the other planets in every measurable way, including it with Mercury. Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune was like including a motorcycle in a list of trucks. "Science isn't about what makes us feel good," he explained to a particularly hostile audience in Boston. "Science is about what's true. And the truth is that Pluto is more similar to the thousands of other objects in the Kuiper Belt than it is to the 8 classical planets." The controversy intensified in 2005 when astronomers discovered Eris, an object in the outer solar system that was actually larger than Pluto. If Pluto was a planet, then Eris should be too. And if Eris was a planet, then dozens of other similar objects should also be planets. Suddenly, the solar system could have dozens or even hundreds of planets. This discovery forced the International Astronomical Union to finally address the Pluto problem. They couldn't keep adding planets every time astronomers found large objects in the outer solar system. They needed a clear scientific definition of what constituted a planet. Tyson was invited to be part of the IAU committee that would make this historic decision. For weeks, astronomers from around the world debated the criteria for planetary status. The discussions were intense, sometimes bitter, as scientists grappled with redefining one of the most basic concepts in astronomy. The committee proposed 3 criteria for planetary status. The object must orbit the Sun, must have enough mass to be roughly spherical, and must have cleared its orbit of other objects. Pluto failed the 3rd criterion spectacularly. Its orbit was cluttered with thousands of other Kuiper Belt objects, while the 8 classical planets dominated their orbital zones completely. On August 24, 2006, the IAU voted. Pluto was officially reclassified as a dwarf planet, a new category that recognized its spherical shape, while acknowledging its failure to meet full planetary criteria. The vote should have vindicated Tyson, but instead it intensified the attacks against him. He became the public face of Pluto's demotion, the man who had started this entire controversy with his museum display. Angry emails poured in from around the world. Television comedians mocked him. Children sent him drawings of sad, crying Pluto. But the most serious challenge came from within the scientific community itself. A group of prominent planetary scientists, led by Dr. Alan Stern, the principal investigator of NASA's New Horizons mission to Pluto, began organizing opposition to the IAU decision. "This is not science," Stern declared in a widely publicized interview. "This is politics. A few hundred astronomers meeting in Prague cannot overturn decades of established science. Pluto has been a planet since 1930, and it should remain a planet." Stern and his supporters argued that the cleared its orbit criterion was fundamentally flawed. They pointed out that Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Neptune all shared their orbits with asteroids and other objects. By the IAU's strict interpretation, these worlds might not qualify as planets either. The opposition movement gained momentum throughout 2006 and early 2007. Stern organized a petition signed by 300 planetary scientists, rejecting the IAU definition. Several state legislatures passed resolutions declaring Pluto still a planet within their borders. The controversy was tearing apart the astronomical community. That's when NASA called the emergency meeting for August 2007. The space agency was under enormous pressure from Congress, which was funding the New Horizons mission to Pluto. Lawmakers were asking uncomfortable questions. Why was NASA spending hundreds of millions of dollars to visit a dwarf planet? How could they justify the mission if Pluto wasn't even a real planet anymore? NASA Administrator Michael Griffin had summoned the key figures in the Pluto controversy to headquarters in Washington. Tyson, Stern, Morrison, and a dozen other prominent astronomers sat around a polished conference table while Griffin laid out the political reality. "This controversy is damaging NASA's reputation and jeopardizing our funding," Griffin said bluntly. "Congress is threatening to cut support for planetary science if we can't present a united front on basic solar system structure. We need to resolve this situation." The room erupted in competing arguments. Stern insisted that the IAU decision was illegitimate and should be reversed. Morrison argued for accepting the new classification while better explaining it to the public. Other astronomers proposed various compromises and modifications. Finally, Griffin turned directly to Tyson. "Neil, you started this whole mess with your museum display. You have more public credibility than anyone else in this room. If you publicly support reinstating Pluto as a planet, the controversy dies, the opposition collapses, we can move forward with unity." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Griffin was offering. Tyson could end the controversy with a single public statement. He could restore peace to the astronomical community, save NASA's funding, and stop the flood of hate mail from heartbroken children. All he had to do was abandon his scientific principles. Tyson looked around the room at his colleagues, many of whom were watching him with hopeful expressions. These were good people, dedicated scientists who genuinely believed they were protecting astronomy from political interference. Some of them had been his mentors, others his close friends for decades. He thought about the thousands of angry letters he'd received, the children who saw him as the villain who destroyed their cosmic neighborhood. He thought about the teachers who struggled to explain why their textbooks were suddenly wrong. He thought about the comedians who mocked him nightly on television. Then he thought about Carl Sagan, his mentor who had taught him that science required absolute intellectual honesty, even when that honesty was unpopular or uncomfortable. Tyson stood up slowly. His decision made. "No," he said quietly. "I won't do it." Griffin's face darkened. "Neil, you're not thinking clearly about this. The political pressure is enormous. If you don't help us resolve this situation, there could be serious consequences for all of planetary science funding." "Mike, I understand the political pressure," Tyson replied, "but I became a scientist to discover and teach truth, not to manage public relations for Congress. Pluto is not a planet. It never really was a planet by any scientific definition that makes sense. Pretending otherwise doesn't serve science or education." Stern leaned forward aggressively. "Neil, your stubborn pride is damaging the entire field. Sometimes leadership means admitting when you're wrong." Tyson turned to face Stern directly. "Alan, I'm not wrong about this, and you know it. Your New Horizons mission is still valuable, whether Pluto is called a planet or a dwarf planet. The science doesn't change based on labels. But if we start changing scientific classifications based on political pressure, we lose our integrity completely." "This isn't about integrity," Morrison interjected. "This is about practical education policy. Children are confused. Teachers are frustrated. The public has lost confidence in astronomy because we can't agree on basic facts. The children are confused because we've been teaching them something that wasn't quite true for 75 years, Tyson responded. "Yes, change is difficult. Yes, learning new information can be uncomfortable. But that's how science works. We discover new things. We revise our understanding. We move forward with better knowledge." Griffin made one final appeal. "Neil, I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture here. NASA's planetary science program employs thousands of people. Their careers depend on continued congressional support. Are you really willing to jeopardize all of that for the sake of technical classification?" Tyson was quiet for a long moment. He understood exactly what he was being asked to sacrifice: his relationships with colleagues, his standing in the scientific community, potentially even his career. But he also understood what he was being asked to compromise: the principles that made science meaningful. "Mike, I became an astrophysicist because I believe the universe is knowable, that careful observation and honest reasoning can reveal truth about reality. If I abandon that belief now, if I say something I know to be scientifically incorrect because it's politically convenient, then I'm no longer a scientist. I'm just another talking head telling people what they want to hear." He gathered his papers and stood to leave. Pluto is a fascinating, complex world that teaches us about the formation and evolution of our solar system. It doesn't need to be called a planet to be worth studying. The New Horizons mission will return incredible data, whether we classify its target as a planet, a dwarf planet, or a Kuiper belt object. The science stands on its own merit. As Tyson reached the door, Griffin called after him. "Neil, if you walk out of here without helping resolve this, you're going to be remembered as the man who destroyed Pluto. Is that really the legacy you want?" Tyson paused and turned back. "Mike, I'd rather be remembered as someone who told difficult truths than as someone who told comfortable lies. If that makes me unpopular, so be it." The reaction to Tyson's refusal was swift and harsh. Within hours, news of the failed NASA meeting leaked to the press. Headlines across the country portrayed him as an arrogant academic who cared more about being right than about public education or children's feelings. The hate mail intensified. Death threats arrived at his office. Protesters gathered outside the Hayden Planetarium with signs reading, "Save Pluto" and "Fire Tyson." Several major donors to the American Museum of Natural History threatened to withdraw their support unless Tyson was removed from his position. But something unexpected happened as well. Letters of support began arriving from teachers, students, and scientists around the world. "Thank you for standing up for intellectual honesty," wrote a high school science teacher from Ohio. "You've shown my students that science requires courage, not just knowledge. A group of European astronomers published a letter in Science magazine defending Tyson's position. Dr. Tyson has demonstrated the kind of scientific integrity that our field desperately needs, they wrote. His willingness to accept professional consequences rather than compromise scientific accuracy should be celebrated, not condemned. Most surprisingly, some of the angry children began changing their minds as they learned more about the science behind the decision. A fourth-grade class in California sent Tyson a collective letter. "We were mad at first, but our teacher explained about Kuiper Belt objects and dwarf planets. Now we think it's cool that Pluto is the king of the dwarf planets instead of the smallest regular planet." The controversy gradually shifted as the New Horizons spacecraft approached Pluto in 2015. The mission returned stunning images and data that revealed Pluto to be far more complex and interesting than anyone had imagined. It had active geology, possible subsurface oceans, and a remarkably diverse landscape. But the mission also confirmed everything Tyson had been saying about Pluto's nature. It was clearly a member of the Kuiper Belt, similar in composition and behavior to thousands of other objects in the outer solar system. The data vindicated the reclassification completely. In interviews following the New Horizons flyby, even some of Tyson's harshest critics admitted he had been right. "I still disagree with how the decision was made," Stern said, "but I have to acknowledge that the scientific evidence supports the dwarf planet classification." By 2020, most astronomy textbooks had fully incorporated the 8-planet model, and a new generation of students was growing up with the correct understanding of solar system structure. Pluto was still beloved, but now as the most famous member of a fascinating new category of objects. Looking back on the controversy, Tyson reflected on the personal cost of maintaining scientific integrity. "I lost some friendships," he admitted in a 2019 interview. "I was vilified in the press for years. I received thousands of pieces of hate mail, but I also learned that standing up for truth, even unpopular truth, can inspire others to value honesty over comfort." "Do you regret the way you handled it?" the interviewer asked. Tyson considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain it caused children who felt like I was taking something away from them. I regret the stress it created for teachers and parents. But I don't regret insisting on scientific accuracy. If we start bending truth to avoid hurt feelings, we lose the foundation that makes science trustworthy." The most poignant validation came in a letter from a college student in 2021. "Dr. Tyson, I was one of those kids who hated you for destroying Pluto. But studying astronomy in college, I finally understand what you were trying to teach us. Science isn't about what we want to be true, it's about what actually is true. Thank you for not backing down, even when we made it so hard for you." The story of Neil deGrasse Tyson and the Pluto controversy represents one of the most significant moments in modern science communication. It demonstrated the tension between scientific accuracy and public sentiment, between intellectual integrity and political pressure. Tyson's refusal to compromise his scientific principles, despite enormous personal and professional costs, helped establish a new standard for how scientists should respond to political interference. His willingness to endure years of public hostility, rather than say something he knew to be incorrect, showed that scientific integrity cannot be negotiated away. The Pluto reclassification ultimately benefited both science and education. Students now learn about the solar system as it actually is, not as previous generations wished it were. The discovery of hundreds of dwarf planets has opened new areas of research and expanded our understanding of planetary formation. But perhaps most importantly, Tyson's stand demonstrated that sometimes the most loving thing an educator can do is tell the truth, even when that truth is initially unwelcome. Science requires the courage to follow evidence wherever it leads, regardless of personal consequences. If this story of scientific courage and intellectual integrity inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for truth is always worth the cost, even when that cost seems overwhelming.